This is Jack McDevitt. I'm Kiana Sparr's grandfather. And this is a picture of me. That would be Captain John McDevitt, MD, Medical Corps, United States Army. I finished my internship, which was the completion of my medical training in June of that year. So this was my first real medical adventure. It was October 1967 that I went to Vietnam to spend a year. And I took pictures when I could to remember the journey that I was on. The American flag side by side with the flag of South Vietnam. The sign of the 18th Surgical Hospital, where I spent most of my time during my year in South Vietnam. This is the surgical hospital, the 18th Surgical Hospital in Lai Khe, South Vietnam. This is referred to as a MUST hospital, a mobile unit surgical transportable. We did have the hospital transported once during my tour from the city of Lai Khe to the city of Quang Tri, far north near the DMZ period. These hospitals were designed to treat wounded soldiers immediately out of the front lines, provide all emergency care, usually involving extensive surgery, to keep them in the hospital for perhaps just 24 hours, maybe 48, but never longer, and then transporting them quickly by helicopter to a larger hospital facility that could provide the ongoing care. I'm taking a medical history of a sick soldier in a treatment area within the hospital. This scene is within a surgical suite during an active surgical procedure. This is housing for staff and support troops. That's a large water bag hanging in the front. My house, or what we referred to as a hooch, which was shared by several doctors for home. We're getting ready now to fill more sandbags to pile around our tent for protection from any incoming rockets or mortars. Playtime. We did have periods of quiet when we would get together and play cards or play outdoor games or just go jogging. We did take care of some civilians who were injured or sick, and we did take care of newborn babies on occasion. Here is a picture of twins in an incubator. This picture is of a young girl with club feet. I had never seen this in my training, but I recognized it as being a real tragedy. Her feet are literally turned upside down, and she's walking on the tops of her feet. There was nothing we could do to help her then, but I thought it was quite remarkable how adaptive she has become. This is a Huey helicopter, a gunship. You can see the door gun, the rockets, and there's a rotating turret that fired bullets at a very rapid rate. Here is a Red Cross helicopter, also a Huey-style craft. There is shown 3 pictures of helicopters coming into the landing zone at the hospital. The patients were then carried on stretcher from the landing site into the emergency area. It became evident quite quickly how tragic war is, with the sometimes horrendous wounds that the soldiers were receiving. It struck me as being a little bit strange to hear the purpose of the medical corps. We were told that the Army's expressed purpose is to preserve the fighting strength. This, I guess, is how an army looks at life, but our approach was to save lives and hopefully get these young men back home again. This series of slides shows a C-130 transport plane used to transport our hospital to a new location. It took quite a few of these planes to carry all the material and all of the soldiers to the new location. There's also a picture of a 4.2-inch mortar, a 155 millimeter artillery, a weather reconnaissance plane, and an APC. That's an armored personnel carrier. These were extremely dangerous. They did carry a number of soldiers with protection from sidearm projectiles, but they were notorious for running over mines and then having the soldiers inside severely injured or killed. This is a flamethrower that came into our area and burned down some brush. As you can see, it's quite effective, and it reminded me on reviewing these pictures how our troops used napalm to cause enormous burning of areas to clear fields so that the enemy could be exposed. But the napalm caused such horrendous injuries to people, including our soldiers who were somehow in the wrong area. My first patient was a young man who had a severe leg wound from napalm, and it was extremely difficult to repair. In fact, I do believe that he lost his leg. At Christmas, we did celebrate some, but very little. Here's a picture of me sitting with a small Christmas tree that someone had sent to me, and another picture of a manger scene that some of the soldiers had built. Bob Hope brought a show to the Lai Khe area where our hospital was located. As you can see, there was an enormous crowd. It was difficult to see, and it did seem to me a little bit insulting that directly in front of the stage there was quite a large stand built so that they could mount cameras so that video could be taken to show back home on television. Here are some pictures of the Vietnam people that I really grew to enjoy and appreciate. these dancers were gathered in the street of a little community that we had a chance to drive through. There's Mama-san and her child on a bike. Bikes were a frequent mode of transportation. We frequently saw shrines, and this is a few of the ones that I took pictures of. There are certainly Buddhist, and you can see Christian as well. I caught sight of this man working one day and realized that he was actually pumping water from a lower location up to fill one of the rice fields. You can see him sitting with a child, and he's pedaling. Perhaps the boy is too, and they have designed a method to bring the water up in small containers on a rotating system. It was really pretty fascinating. We were struck by rockets or mortars several times, and only once were some of our buildings hit. We never did receive any personnel injuries, however. Here's pictures of areas where bombs had exploded off our perimeter, and one of these is an ammunition dump that was struck. The time of the Tet Offensive, which would be the end of January, at that time our hospital was greatly threatened because of the evidence that the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong were going to try to overrun the base that our hospital was located at and use our hospital's location near the perimeter to begin their attempt to overrun. We had to send all patients out of the hospital almost immediately after surgery, but continued to operate wearing helmets and flak jackets and being prepared to fight back or run if that attempt to capture the base began, period. Fortunately for us, they never initiated that effort. We had some stormy conditions off and on. The weather was often very warm, but there were periods of heavy rainfall and storms and local flooding, as you can see. It comes to mind now that this whole experience for me of being in Vietnam was like a storm, that I came to Vietnam convinced that we were doing the right thing as a nation to stop the advance of communism. But when I started working and seeing the devastation of this beautiful country and seeing the warm heart in so many of the people that we came to see or treat, these would be the Vietnamese people, and to see the tragedy to our soldiers, I realized that war is really not an answer except as a last resort. And I came to realize that stopping communism had to be something that we did with our minds and our hearts, and not with war. So it was there was a lot of discussion and thought among the doctors, and that I had with myself, and I was proud to be a physician providing care for these soldiers and civilians, but very sad to see that we ever became involved as a country in this war.